Feed My Sheep Reports and more. It's good to be back. It's been a few days. It's the 28th of November. And we've got a couple of other programs loaded up we just haven't gotten to yet, but we'll get to those yet. We've had a large earthquake today in South America, and we're going to talk about that. That's going to be the primary issue today because there's lots related to that. Before we begin, all of our programs are dedicated to our Heavenly Father service, so we'll begin with a prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you. You offer us your wings of protection, your strength, and you offer us so many promises for end times, and we are greatly strengthened through all of the promises that you keep. You've never broken one, and we thank you for that. Jesus, we ask that you continue to shepherd us through your programs, and Holy Spirit, we ask for the understanding that we need to discern all things. There is so much falsehood these days, and we pray that we have good understanding of what goes on. And all of this in your holy name, Jesus. Amen. Now, first, before I begin, a little bit of housekeeping. I have been answering comments, and apparently for the last while, I've been moved to the possible spam file by the Oversight Agency. Well, I've recently been made a moderator of our own program, or of God's program. So rather than just being on here with Esther, I'm also a moderator now, and hopefully my comments will now go through or my replies to your comments. And we do appreciate all of your comments and questions and endeavor to answer them. Sorry that the word hasn't been getting out, but at least I'm glad that we recognized this, found that none of my comments were showing up, and hopefully rectified the issue. Your comments are valuable to us, so thank you. And thank you for those that add insights, things that they know from their areas and share them with others. We appreciate that as well. So, before we begin, apparently I've got some legend up there that we didn't need, but regardless of that, this is Peru. And here is a Peruvian earthquake location. Now, you'll notice this is well inland of the shoreline. This is the Andes Mountains right here. This is the Pitcairn Islands out in this area. And so the Pitcairn Islands, it's 300 miles inland to where this earthquake was in Peru. Now, this wasn't showing, at least earlier, it wasn't showing on USGS, but it was certainly showing on EMSC, and it showed well on the heliplot. So we have Ecuador here, we have Peru here, and this is 300 miles inland of the shoreline. It's about 120 miles to the east side of the Andes Mountains, so this is a further 180 miles inland from the Andes. And that changes things quite a bit, because usually the activity is out here on the west side of the Andes, and now it's on the east side, so the potentials are different. And Pitcairn Island, if we just do a rough measurement, we're about 2.5 times, almost 3 times as far away. So we're from the coast as it is this way, so we're probably about 1,200 miles, something close to that, to Pitcairn Island, which is not too bad, actually. This was a very large earthquake that showed all over the world, and it was hard to assess this. And why would I be interested, or why are we interested in Pitcairn Island? Well, Pitcairn Island is one site that downsizes. It's under amplitude. It is downsizing the earthquake waveform very significantly. We've got, this is Ecuador right here. We've got a site in Ecuador, and it shows a large signal. We've got a site in Chile that shows large, but this shows much larger in Adak, Alaska, than it does in Pitcairn Island. So Pitcairn Island is turned well down, And I was thinking it was about 20%. It's actually more about 15% of true. But let's have a look at the waveforms that we have associated with this earthquake. We're going to start in Chile. So Chile just to the south and a little bit to the west, but mainly to the south. And this is a large waveform. We caught this fairly early on, about 6 hours in. So a large waveform. This waveform is large enough, it doesn't give us a distinct understanding of what's going on, except that in this area here, it's the larger waveform, obviously, but it's cut off by the top of the seismogram, and it doesn't allow us to get a good look, and we see no separation between these areas. So it's hard to tell what's going on because the signal is so large. And the same goes for Ecuador. Ecuador is quite close and isn't helpful in looking at the seismogram except to say that this was a large earthquake. So it's propagating a large signal. It's a propagated signal is a signal that's sent to another more distant site. We don't actually have a site that's right close to this in Peru, but Ecuador's close enough. Adak, Alaska still provides us with a large signal. So propagation is good all the way to Alaska, and this is, of course, down south of the equator, so to get a large signal all the way to Adak, Alaska tells us this was a very large earthquake. We also see the first indications of great depth associated with this earthquake, regardless of what the agencies might say, and they're talking about 120 or something kilometers deep. The seismogram says otherwise. It's not me, it's the seismogram. So the seismogram is telling us when you see, this is 1 hour per line. There's a minute and 20 seconds between these two waves. A minute and 20 seconds. We're in very low frequency. Or in low frequency waveforms, this constitutes it being having a very deep aspect when we get to a minute and 20 seconds between waves. And so now we'll look at, because the site is too large to really do us any good looking at close sites, we're going to step away to Corvallis, Washington. And Corvallis, Washington is an area of a turned down seismogram. You can see this is much smaller than Adak, Alaska. And here we see a very coarse waveform. So here we're again looking at, in some cases, a minute and 20 seconds between some of these lower frequency waveforms. That's not the best picture of what's going on, but it's getting us there. Now we're going to Johnston Island, and it's far enough away that we're getting some better signal separation, and we see there are two largest waveforms when we're looking this way. Now there's 1, 2, 3, 4 precursor events mixed into this. And we don't see this on every seismogram, but we know there's 4, and then there's 2 very deep signals in here going when we look towards Johnston Island. So this shows the shallower episodes happening first and then getting deep afterwards. But that's not what every site is showing. We've got some activity in here that's fully overlapping. There's a big overlap of activity. So we're not seeing everything that's going on. There's as many as 15 different events, more than 15 different events mixed into this. And you wouldn't know it to look at Pitcairn Island. Here we are at Pitcairn Island. And now we see the waveform in reality. We've got, this is one look at it. And it doesn't tell us everything, but it begins to explain things. We've got a very deep aspect here in these two signals, and they overlap into here. So we're over 10 minutes in duration with those other signals, and then we have a higher frequency earthquake here, a little lower frequency earthquake here, and we've actually got overlapping signals here. But at least we can see some definition of size. Now, that's because we can see that because Pitcairn Island, I was saying 20%, it's more like 10 or 15% of true. It's turned down that much. Now, what we see from Pitcairn Island is we see this waveform here is about 7.25 minutes in duration, but we see this last wave here is very wide again. So we've got this would continue for a period of time. We can also see there's a big gap in here. So there's one wave there, one wave there, one wave there. These other ones are overlap. There's another earthquake hiding underneath this. So we're going to look at another site and see if we can explain that overlap, and then we'll come back. So, where were we? Newport, Washington. Now, this site, I'm going to just read what I wrote first, separates the deep S waves better. The first two longest sets of S waves total 15 minutes in duration. That makes them 7.5 minutes each. And we subtract a little for distance, and that gets us down to 7.25 minutes, which is what we had at Pitcairn Island. So that matches things, and it explains then that Pitcairn Island actually had a full overlap of two signals, and the first was very deep and the second shallower. And we see in this that there was 15 earthquakes, over 15 earthquakes in series. So let's have a look at this. We can, if we measure from here, this deep wave here, over to this side here, we have 15 minutes between these two. We divide it in half because there's our two main earthquake wave sets. This is the deeper one. This is the shallower one. This is at an intermediate depth. Okay, this is at a deeper depth. This one is in the neighborhood of 600 kilometers deep to be this wide. We've got very few earthquake waves counted over a 7.5 minute time span. There's only actually 8 waves in there. I counted from another site. So there's 0.9 of a minute, 0.90 of a minute per wave. So that's a low frequency wave set. That tells us we're down way deep. And so that's what gets us to 600 kilometers deep. That broad, or that width between the waves. Now, there's some interesting things we need to know about this earthquake. First of all, I was showing you the number of earthquakes involved in this S-wave sets. We've got one here. There's another one here. That's at least a 5. There's some small earthquake wave activity in there, but there's another one here. And we can see there's some overlap. There's some smaller activity and some larger activity. So this is the larger stuff up here. These are separate following earthquakes that are tied in with the previous signal, later signal, sorry. So the earthquake begins here on the 11 o'clock line. These ones here are coming off the 12 o'clock line. They're centered down a little lower. And you can see that if you measure from top to bottom. So the overlap makes it more complicated. This earthquake here does not come right after this one. It's a little over an hour later. So this is an earthquake that's mixed into the secondary signal, and you can tell that with these waveforms matching there and there with the top of the hour line. Right? So they just step 1 hour back from the end of and the start of the seismograms. So that centers it on the line below 11 o'clock at the 12 o'clock line. And this activity along here that are hitting the top, those are all mixed in with the early activity. But down here we can see this overlap of darkness, dark lines, and we've got all kinds of mixed signals in here. So basically, to break this down, we've got an earthquake here, another one here, another one here, another one there. We've got a smaller, shorter one here, and then you've got some very short earthquakes mixed in here. And these are in the 5.0 range. And that carries through to give us another follow-up earthquake, close to 5.5, maybe a 6. Actually, that's more like a 6 for duration, coming in on the 12 o'clock line. So we're 12:33 UTC at that time. So there's a lot of earthquakes mixed into this waveform. So this was a big event. Now, I looked at the location. It's just jungle. It's inland far enough that we're into the Amazon drainage. And it's very flat in an area of a couple of lakes nearby. So let's look at what this earthquake means, because a very deep earthquake how big was it? Very big earthquake. This earthquake was so large, propagated such a large signal. This was an 8.4. Now, it's an 8.4 at about 600 kilometers deep. This is huge, guys. This is a huge earthquake. Very few people in the area, not likely to be damaging, and being very deep, it's going to soften the surface felt effect of it. Not going to be an area that has a lot of cell phone coverage and stuff like that, so you're probably not going to get a lot of felt reports. The issue is what's going to happen downstream of this. So I'm just going to read what I've got here because I've written this all up because it's quite detailed. So counted the waves, 8 waves over 7.25 minutes. The average wave duration 90.90 minutes per wave, 0.90 minutes per wave. But some of the last 2 waves were about 1.20 minutes in duration. This earthquake matches up with other earthquakes that have been recorded at near 600 kilometers deep. But this very deep earthquake, and this is important, this very deep earthquake has the largest amplitude signal that I have ever seen. For a deep, deep earthquake. For a very deep earthquake, I've never seen one with this amplitude. Now, why do these very deep earthquakes occur? The reason is that you get subducting crust. And over time, and we're talking a lot of time, it in convection currents and for reasons unknown as well, these pieces of crust can be pulled or drawn down into very deep areas of the earth, in the well deep under the asthenosphere. And in that process of super high heat, and this is the best science we have from the professionals, okay? This is not my presentation. This is my presentation of their material. So the best science we have is this descending crustal material becomes densified under intense pressure with intense heat. So the extreme pressures at great depth cause a sequential series of explosions or implosions. They're not explosions, they're implosions. So one area implodes and it causes a shock wave in that other, in nearby areas that are just set to have the same effect of densifying the material. And that waveform of that implosion spreads and catches another area that's ready to become more dense, just off the edge of doing it itself, and it implodes and gets more dense, and a whole bunch of other areas do that. And the more area that does that, the bigger the earthquake. And so you have an implosion sequence caused by densification of matter, of rock. It's undergoing a transformative process deep in the earth. And that's what's causing these very, very deep earthquakes. So it's not what is normally presented, but this is the this is the current science that has the best foundation by the best people. So I think it's this gets beyond what anything anyone could otherwise understand, because there's nothing that isn't molten at that depth. So what is going to cause something to initiate an implosion? The upside down mountains and the valleys of the underside of the crust, they don't get down that far either. So this is down too deep for any other process to make sense. So at this point, without absolutely knowing, this is the best science we have. Now, what follows these super deep events? That's the big question. For this, we go back to Bella and Rebecca with Dutch Synths, and Dutch is still on the air. Bella and Rebecca, I think they were mods for them. I'm not sure if they're back or not. I believe they were for a time. But anyway, they did quite a bit of study of deep earthquakes and the outcome from these. They discovered that very deep, moderate-sized earthquakes would lead to larger, shallower earthquakes that would begin in the near vicinity. But they also noted that very large, very deep earthquakes don't necessarily follow this pattern. Instead, and Dutch has talked about this as well, they send out a spread of force, and whole areas will have plate margin shifts and major fault shifts. Now, these were seen fairly commonly from the very deep earthquakes near Fiji. However, Rebecca and Bella could only work with the depths assigned by the large agencies. And this is a little bit problematic, as the large agencies have proven to be quite inaccurate in many areas regarding earthquakes, including the misquoting the depths. And especially the depths of very large earthquakes. And in fact, they even omit magnitude 9 earthquakes in one event on the 27th of December 2020. The 9.0 that occurred in Antarctica was not said to occur by any. It was entirely omitted by every agency on Earth that I'm aware of. Any that made the news, any that I've checked with or looked with. EMSC didn't report it. USGS didn't report it, and in fact, every other YouTube that looked at our data said no, it didn't happen. But certainly, it showed on the seismograms, and we reported it, and it came out in a magazine article later. But anyway, the agencies are unreliable, especially regards to accurately reporting large earthquakes and depths of very large earthquakes. And that creates a problem for anybody that's studying this without a serious background in seismology, whether self-taught or professional. It doesn't much matter. So in spite of all of this, Bella and Rebecca did a great job of being able to show a pattern of widespread plate margin shifts and major fault shifts following earthquakes that are both very deep and very large. And this was primarily from South Pacific data following deep Fiji area earthquakes, because those are the most common. But very deep, very large earthquakes are really quite rare. So it makes the very large ones, very large, very deep earthquakes in combination, are very hard to study because there's a data shortage regarding them. But the ones that we have had have not resulted in larger, shallower earthquakes. Not when they're in the 8+ range. Now, this earthquake, large and deep, is the largest very deep earthquake that I've ever seen. Now, the location of this earthquake to be large and deep, this is not someplace that is recognized for commonly having deep earthquakes. The Fiji area is that South Pacific region, and including the Solomons, that's recognized to have deep earthquakes in that area. But this is not an area of deep earthquakes, so this is very rare. We don't develop data from having something rarely happen that's also rare to start with. It's rare to have a very deep, large earthquake, and it's rare to have any large earthquakes in this area, so we don't have anything to go by. So there is no scientific opportunity, or no opportunity to use the scientific process of observable and repeatable for this earthquake that is both very large and very deep. We cannot apply local knowledge to this unprecedented earthquake, but we can apply the Fiji model as having the greatest potential of downstream earthquake outcomes. So we know which way the force flow is normally, but this also creates a change. We can utilize the foundation of force transfer processes that we have seen in this region, and we can track the force progress through earthquakes and VLF waves. But there's a problem with this one. This one didn't come in normally. To get an earthquake in this area, it comes from offshore to the east and comes across. This one originated well east of the Andes Mountains. It's 180 miles east. And so this changes the pattern, because normally it comes in from the east, hits offshore, hits on or near the shoreline, but it's west of the Andes Mountains, and then it goes north and south. The force goes north and south, and it may go a little bit inland, but the Andes Mountains present an impediment to force flow, and so that usually diverts the force north and south primarily. This one is to the east of the Andes, and that changes everything. So now, what do we do with that? What do we expect to happen? And what should we do? Should a watch be issued? That's kind of the first question. So the earthquake was rare in location, depth, and size, and it was large. So it should cause a watch to occur, in my opinion. But where do you issue a watch for? Because this one doesn't fit normal patterns. So if we're going to issue a watch, how long should a watch last? Well, larger earthquakes create longer lasting downstream effects, and I would watch for 16 days. Well, that was a simple one to answer, but how about the downstream effects? What do we get using the South Pacific model? Because we don't have a model to use for Peru. We have seen a spread of earthquakes as large as 6.0 spread out from the South Pacific. This one's larger. This is the largest deep earthquake that I've seen. So I can see this jumping up in magnitude to 6.5 to 7.5 range earthquake spreading out from this initial deep earthquake in Peru. Now that's really on the high side. 7 is more likely. I've added half a magnitude top and bottom because we're in an area that we've never seen before. This is uncharted territory. Where should a watch occur? And that's a big question. Well, north, we're on the east side of the Andes, so north to inland Colombia, and south to inland Bolivia. Force is going to spread out regardless of whether it's on one side of the Andes or the other. It's going to go north and south because that's what force does. It's going to have a hard time backfeeding across the Andes, so it's less likely that it's going to get to the coast and go down to Chile, but that remains a potential. But it's very likely, now that it's already across the Andes, where it begins on the east side of the Andes, is very likely to go to, of all places, Brazil, which is unusual. We don't usually get force going through into Brazil. So this presents a potential because it doesn't have the Andes deflecting the force. So all of Brazil should be watching that they may get a large earthquake out of this. This is a big area because it's such a big earthquake, and we don't have a pattern to follow. So who do you warn? We're actually warning at least the closer proximity areas of Brazil, inland Colombia, inland Bolivia. Secondary, other than that, we have secondary areas. Those are the primary areas. Secondary areas to watch, we would see migration, I would expect, to Venezuela. And this is certainly big enough to shift the entire Caribbean plate. Areas within the Caribbean plate have already been shifting. This started ages ago, year and a half ago, with big activity, 8.475 in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico? Yeah. Big activity back then, and we've seen, and I've done a program on showing the whole of the Caribbean shifting with VLF waves over the course of I think 10 days. Massive VLF waves through every site that we have in the Caribbean, including Venezuela. So we've already seen the Caribbean plate have a series of VLF waves that showed that the entire plate pretty much shifted. and that was on the north and south boundaries. So it wouldn't surprise me to see it again. Now, secondary effects, it could backflow across to Chile because it's coming from so deep. So it could actually create effects on the subduction zone on the west side of South America and lead to an early, hopefully smaller than the typical. We get some large earthquakes in Peru, big subduction events. I believe it has the record for a 9.5, the largest recorded earthquake. Yet there was initial reports of the Japan earthquake being larger, the one that hit Fukushima. It was downgraded later, but that was initially a 10, or something very close to a 10. And by the damage, I would say that was more correct. But this is large enough to get things going in along the coast of South America. But I'm not expecting that. I'm expecting that because that would be a backflow against the typical direction of force flow, that it's more likely to go north, south, and east, and not backflow into Chile across the Andes. But there's a potential because we're in uncharted territory. We're not sure. I'm not sure. Argentina is a question in this case as the force tries to move east, and the Andes are mostly out of the picture because it's got to cross. Argentina is mostly out of the picture because it's got to cross so much of Brazil to get to Argentina. It may get out to the coast. If we see Chile react, then we may see Argentina follow. So if we do get activity on the coast, on the west coast of Chile, then we should see Argentina follow, and that would be following the normal pattern of force flow at that point. Now, looking at how many earthquakes we had, and the duration of the activity, Ann Arbor, Michigan, that's where we're at here, we can see very clearly, because we've got a pretty quiet seismogram leading into this, that the activity, the shaking of the earth, the plates, the vibrations in the crust of the earth are carrying on for many hours. We're over 12 hours, or we're near 12 hours into this at 2200, beginning on the 11 o'clock line here, so 11 hours in at the bottom, and no signs of it dropping back to a normal baseline at this point. I mean, it's diminishing in size, but we've got many hours to go still of this continued shaking that fits, like I say, it fits with an 8.4. A deep earthquake at an 8.4 is massive. And I just wanted to show you Enshi, China, because all the way over in Enshi, like Keonsong is much the same. It's showing large activity all the way over in China. That's a long ways away from this earthquake. And we already looked at Newport. So that's the end of this. Yeah, quite an earthquake, quite an event. And ongoing, as I said. As far as the after effects of it, they're still, and I mean the body wave. We measure the total duration from the onset of the earthquake to the end of the body wave, and that gives us a good indication of what the overall size was. So we're going to see where this one ends up to, and to give us a kind of a final metric to add to the estimation of size, because we can't say absolutely that it is this or that size, but we do a close estimate. And we're usually within a point or two of reality when we actually have other quality individuals weighing in. We find that we're on the ball, we're right on top of it. So there you go. I'm confident in my assessments, and I hope you guys are as well. Hopefully you're enjoying what we're doing here. I know we don't come on every day because we just don't have the time. But come in on the important events. I spent quite a bit of time today assessing this, writing this up. So we want to make sure you have very good information when it counts, when it makes a difference. And we see all kinds of measures, unmasked surprises all over the world. Well, it's actually masked surprises, but there's ongoing pressure as those of evil are getting a little more scared of what's going on. They're going to apply the pressure, and the pressure is they're responding to the pressure that's being applied to them. And this pressure is going to increase. They are ahead of their timeline. God's not going to allow it, and they're going to be shut down. But we're going to need to stand strong through this time and stand in faith. That's what separates us, is the faith that we have in our Creator, a wonderful and loving God, and to Him be all the glory. And may you have the peace that passes understanding through what comes. We are meek before God, but as Israel was strong with warriors fighting against those of evil, so will we fight against evil. And may you go with God. And we'll see you next time on Feed My Sheep, Earthquake Reports, and more. Bye for now.